Hello everyone, we're going to be doing right triangle trigonometry. That's right, we're doing trigonometry, which is just a fancy way to talk about right triangles. And since we're doing trigonometry, let's learn our first fancy thing here, which is this symbol right here. This symbol you're going to see quite often, and we refer to this symbol as theta. It's actually the 8th letter in the Greek alphabet. Back in geometry, we used like an X or a Y to represent angles. Now we're going to start using Greek letters very often, theta. Now when looking at angles of triangles, we want to be able to recognize the different sides and how they relate to each angle. So let's take a look at our theta here. Our first side I want you to notice is the opposite side. The opposite side is always directly across from your angle. In this case, the opposite side's right over here. Adjacent. Adjacent means right next to. As you can see here, the adjacent side is right alongside the theta. And your hypotenuse, hopefully you remember from geometry, your hypotenuse is always the biggest side across from your right angle. And in this case, right here is your hypotenuse. Boom, let's pull up another triangle here just for practice. First, let's find our angle of importance. Here's our theta. So let's find the opposite side first. Remember, opposite side always goes directly across from theta. So this is our opposite side. Our adjacent side is right next to, right alongside our angle. Here's our adjacent side. And our hypotenuse, once again, the side directly across from our right angle, and it's also always the longest side. Alright, given we're talking about these different sides of right triangles, opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse, can anybody guess where we might be going with this? Drum roll, please. That's right, Sohcahtoa. Sohcahtoa is just an acronym to help us remember our trig functions. First up, we had sine, which equaled the opposite over the hypotenuse. Next, we had cosine, which was the adjacent over the hypotenuse, and tangent, which was opposite over adjacent. I know what you must be saying. Mr. Zonker, we've already learned this. We want something new. Well, I have a surprise for you. Sohcahtoa. Okay, well, that doesn't quite have the same ring to it. But there are actually 3 more trig functions, as you can see here. The first is cosecant, which is hypotenuse over opposite, secant, which is hypotenuse over adjacent, and cotangent, which is adjacent over opposite. These new trig functions are often called reciprocal functions, and thinking of it that way actually is a big help in remembering them. See how sine and cosecant are very similar except reciprocals. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite. Same thing with cosine and secant. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, secant is hypotenuse over adjacent. And tangent and cotangent, same thing. Opposite over adjacent, adjacent over opposite. So if you could remember Sohcahtoa, and you could remember that sine goes with cosecant, cosine goes with secant, and tangent goes with cotangent, except they're the reciprocal, then hopefully you can remember all 6 of your trig functions. These are a must know, so make sure within the next couple weeks you've got all 6 of these stuck in your head. Okay, let's go ahead and find the exact values of the 6 trig functions given this triangle here. So I see my theta is up here in the top right angle. Let's start with sine. Our sine, remember, is opposite over hypotenuse. That's going to be the opposite side, 4 over the hypotenuse, 5. So sine theta is 4 over 5. Next up is cosine. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. The adjacent side is 3. Hypotenuse is 5. That's going to give us 3 over 5. And our tangent is opposite 4 over adjacent 3. Tangent theta equals opposite 4 over the adjacent 3. Looking at our cosecant function, remember cosecant is the hypotenuse over the opposite. That's the hypotenuse 5 over the opposite 4. 5 over 4. And if we compare that with sine, we'll notice it's the reciprocal. Sine is 4 over 5. Cosecant is 5 over 4. Secant is the hypotenuse over the adjacent. That's going to be 5 over 3. again, we notice that's the reciprocal of the cosine, 3 over 5. And cotangent is adjacent over hypotenuse, that's 3 over 4, which we can verify is also the reciprocal of tangent. There are a couple things that are going to be useful in solving your homework problems. I'm not going to go over them because you should know them from before and just to save time. One of these is the Pythagorean theorem. Another is simplifying and rationalizing square roots. If you have forgotten those, no worries. Just do a quick Google search or YouTube search and just refresh on those concepts really quick. But you will use both of those things in solving these types of problems.